it's I've been reading your stuff. I want to say since the late '90s when you and Steve Kim were in over at Mike's Boxing, and this was before
Okay.
fucking smartphones, by the way. So what I would do is in the 2000s when I was in college, I would print out your articles, yours and Steve Kim's, and I would read that, and that would get me to the lunch hour. You know, getting my fucking eyes off a book about lesbian Marxist women or whatever. It was a nice little change reading your articles. So, listen, Doug, I know you're busy. I know it's late. I don't know if it's that late over there in the Pacific Coast, but how long can you stay on? You tell us, man. 15 minutes or?
I'm good. I'm good for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But I apologize for not being available around the 5 o'clock hour my time.
No, don't worry about it.
I kind of spaced out. We had some stuff here, some maintenance people coming to the house, so I had to attend to that, and then I forgot. And I was just on Twitter, and I'm messing around, and I go to my messages, and I'm like, oh crap, that's right. So I apologize that for let's schedule something longer at another time where I can come on at or near the beginning of your show.
Okay. Well, listen, don't worry about it. I know you're a busy guy. You got a family, and you're fucking editing and proofreading a whole bunch of text over there with Ring Magazine.
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
Yeah, that's got to be a pain.
This is not the exciting part. This is writing captions for all the photos that are in the magazine. And by this time you get tired of looking at the same stories, the same copy over and over, and you're just ready for the issue to be done. And actually, the issue is kind of like already on sale. This is kind of interesting because of this pandemic. We can't. We're not able to put this issue on sale, meaning it can't go on the shelves in the United States. It's just there's too many of our vendors are closed down.
Oh.
And we lose too much money, right? So it still goes out to subscribers. Obviously, they paid for it up front. But we are making it available on the online shop at ringtv.com. So you can pre-order the magazine now. So this is kind of different where it's like we're actually not done with the magazine, haven't sent it to the printers yet, but we've already released the cover, which features Roman Gonzalez. And people are able to go to the Ring Shop via the website and order it now. And as soon as it's printed, it'll be mailed to them.
Yeah, there's also the digital versions available, right?
That's true. Well, no, the digital edition won't be available probably until the end of next week.
Oh, I see. All right, well, listen.
But the great thing is if you sign up now, whenever you sign up for that, you'll get 30 days free. So you'll be able to read it, and you'll be able to read last month's issue as well with Tyson Fury on the cover, and you'll be able to read back issues going back to March 2013, which is a pretty good deal.
All right, that's nice. Well, listen, everybody, hold on tight. If you can get your hands on that, maybe a bootleg version or something, I don't know, because they don't print those in China, so there should be no problem catching some of that Corona out there. Listen, Doug, I wanted to ask you something, man, because I know people. This is the first question. I get the chat going here, so we're probably going to be taking questions for the chat. But I guess the big question is, what have you heard about this boxing Corona thing? I mean, when are things going to get back to normal, if at all? And is there any timeline we can expect so far, or are you just like everybody else and just out of the loop and letting the government do their thing?
It's wait and see, and the promoters are at the mercy of the athletic commissions. At least here in the United States, the boxing is regulated by athletic commissions state by state or by certain jurisdictions within the continental U.S. And the athletic commissions are an extension of the government. So it doesn't matter what branch of government, be it city, from city to statewide, if there is a ban on public gatherings, as well there should be. This is a highly contagious, potentially fatal virus. Once the government, such as California Governor Gavin Newsom, puts down the mandate that there's no public gatherings of any kind, sporting or otherwise, boxing promotions cannot go forward. I think probably the earliest we're looking at is maybe late June.
Oh.
Realistically, probably July. And more than a few boxing organizations from the premier boxing champions. You know, PBC, they've announced that they're suspending all business and promotions through the month of May. The World Boxing Organization, one of the major sanctioning organizations, said that it won't sanction any title bouts through the month of June. And, you know, obviously we saw the boxing schedule get cleared in the month of March and most of the events in April. And there are a bunch of events that weren't even announced yet in the month of May that we all know are not going to happen in the month of May, right? We know Canelo Alvarez, Billy Joe Saunders isn't happening in the month of May, if at all. And we know Vasily Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez is not happening on May 30 in New York City. That fight will probably happen later in the year, but we know it's not going to happen on May 30th. And, you know, when the casinos are actually shut down, when Las Vegas casinos shut down, you know, the showbiz world is at a standstill. So we're living through unprecedented times. It's been a long time since an Olympic Games has been postponed or moved off of its Olympiad schedule, not since the World War II. So we're facing that kind of threat. So, you know, when we're facing stuff like this, boxing, like most entertainment, you know, live entertainment, it gets put on the back burner. And, you know, my wife is an epidemiologist, and, you know, this is her study. This is her field, is the study of epidemics, is the study of how diseases move, how disease is spread. And she and her colleagues, they all say the same thing. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And just to, you know, just to kind of encapsulate that, you know, there's a ringside column for every issue of Ring Magazine. It's like the editor's column at the start of each magazine. And obviously the subject of my column was about boxing being put on hold in the month of March. And as I was finishing up the column, I wanted to put some statistics about how many confirmed cases of the coronavirus were in the United States and globally. And I was finishing it up. I first put that statistic in my column midday Tuesday, and the number of confirmed cases in the United States was 50,000. And I finished my column midday Thursday, and that number had gone up to past 80,000. And the United States had gone from being number 3 among nations with the most confirmed cases to number 1. And globally, the count went from a little over 400,000 to over 520,000 globally. And I was watching those statistics all day on Thursday. You know, it was moving. It was the totals were increasing incrementally by the hour. So it's like, you know, the bottom line with, you know, with a lot of states in America, you know, in California in particular, even doctors don't have access to the kits, to the testing kits. So we don't know who has this disease. We don't even know yet. I think when those numbers finally get out, when the CDC gets out the testing kits to every state in the United States and people really start getting tested, then we'll have the real numbers of who has this. And then, you know, we'll really be able to quarantine folks and all. But I think when those real numbers come out, how many people have this disease, you know, have this virus, you know, that's gonna cause its own little panic, and you might see events further postponed just because of that scare. So I think definitely for the next 2 months, you know, big time boxing as we know it, it's off the schedule.
Well, that certainly sucks. Hopefully, it's more.
Yep.
Hopefully, it's more hype. I mean, more. You know, there seems to be a lot of sensationalism from the mainstream media as well. So hopefully,
BDA. Did you hear Boris Johnson's got it?
Well, they say. I mean, listen, I'm no expert in this whole thing, but I did hear from certain experts in the field. They say that the test is not clear cut and dry. It's not like you can just take a sample of blood or saliva and go, oh, this guy's got it. I mean, apparently from what I hear, there's a whole other level.
On an installation down the street at the moment.
Well, so, we'll see, man. We'll see. Listen, Doug, I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat room real quick because I want to get to some of them before we let you go. And then maybe, like you said, later on, we can schedule something a little bit more in depth. But people in this channel,
sure.
yeah, people in this channel, some of these people are by the way, if you could talk closer, a little bit closer to the mic, please, because I'm hearing one comment in particular that keeps saying that he can't hear you, but I hear you fine. But
Okay.
somebody wanted to ask you about Filip, what's his name again? Filip Šgrovic? How do you say his name? The Croatian dude. The heavyweight. Hold on.
Hrgovic. You're about Hrgovic.
Hrgovic, yes. Somebody in the chat room wanted to ask you about Filip Hrgovic. What do you think about him?
Oh, Hrgovic, he's good. I mean, he's a legit prospect. He's not my top heavyweight prospect right now. I think the guy with the most upside, and we'll learn more about him. I'm talking about Daniel Dubois, the British cat. We'll find out more about him once he's able to share the ring with Joe Joyce, because I think Joe Joyce, I don't really consider him a prospect because of his age, but you know, he's a heavyweight up-and-comer. And even being in your early 30s as a heavyweight, that doesn't make you old. You know, heavyweights mature a lot slower than the lighter weight classes. But I think Joyce can serve a purpose in really testing Dubois. I think Dubois has got a lot of natural talent. I like his athleticism. I like the fluidity of his offense.
Yeah.
He's not a polished boxer in terms of his defense, but I see a lot of potential in him. And the fact that he's in his early 20s, he's just 22 years old, or he's no older than 23. That suggests a big upside for him. So I think his ceiling is very high. We don't know how good his chin is yet. We know he can punch. We know he moves well, and he's got an entertaining style, and it doesn't hurt that he's British, right?
Yeah.
And that fight with Joe
He's
Joyce,
he's fighting Joe Joyce though. He's fighting Joe Joyce next.
Yeah, and I think Joe Joyce is going to test him and let us know what we really have. And if he looks good, if he beats Joyce in impressive fashion, maybe he's already a contender. So as far as the heavyweight up-and-comers out there, Dubois is the guy I'm watching right now, but Hrgovic's right underneath him. He's right there. In fact, Hrgovic, and I apologize if I'm butchering that name. Hrgovic, I know he's got good people around him. I know he's going to be developed well. He's more of a polished heavyweight, technically speaking, than Dubois, and he also has a very big upside. And you know, he had a more extensive amateur background than Dubois did.
Well, let me tell you, man, you just broke a lot of hearts out there in our audience. One guy in particular who believes that. Well, there's one guy in particular who believes that the Croatian sensation is just going to butcher everybody, and we keep telling him, "Listen, I think you're overhyping this guy a little bit." Was that?
We got
I said, based on what? What has he done? I mean, he's hardly set the world alight. I mean, look, he's a good fighter, but let's calm down a little bit here. There's some good guys in that heavyweight division at the moment, and for me, he's got a long way to go. So
Absolutely,
we'll see. Dubois, for me, I think he's ahead of Hrgovic right now. He's a bit more exciting, that's for sure.
Same.
By the way,
I agree.
Gonzalo, you want to ask a question since you brokered this meeting?
Sure. How you doing, Dougie? This is Gonzo. I wanted to ask you, since you're the main man. Hey, how's it going? By the way, I'm like Mr. BDA. I've been a long-time follower of the Ring Magazine ever since before I used to be in the military when I was a teenager. Anyhow, I wanted to ask you, have you ever considered making an article about exposing the false narratives from the YouTube boxing community, some of these factions? That by some of these that you know that really like you and Mr. BDA and us, we probably know better. But some of the fans that are tuning into the fights as casuals that want to hear a little boxing and listen to these channels, they could easily believe that Tyson Fury is a cheater by listening to what these people have to say.
Oh yeah, you're talking about like the LDBC.
Yeah,
sure.
That's a big topic.
I guess there's others too. I guess it's not just the LDBC, but yeah, I mean, there's so much of the YouTube world that I'm not aware of. I'm obviously aware of the LDBC because they've attacked me from time to time. And there was a time where I was like, you know, if they attacked me or, you know, attacked a fighter that I liked, I felt the need to kind of clap back at them. But after a while, it's kind of like I felt like I was doing them a favor. You know what I mean? By like, you know, getting them more exposure by getting into it with them. And a lot of them, I can't say for all of them. I'm not going to say every member, everybody who identifies as LDBC to a man is a dirtbag or an asshole or a race baiter. You know, I can't say 100%. I can say a lot of them are, but like the more I would, you know, look at them and listen to them, the more it's like it's either a hustle for them. You know, they're just trying to, you know, appeal to a certain segment of society that needs to hear certain things because they have issues, you know, pride or identity or whatever. Or they themselves have like these identity issues. And I think it runs the spectrum. I swear to God, I listen to some of these dudes and I'm like, okay, you got issues about your blackness, like how you define being a black man. And you're not 100% sure even what that means because you go after people who are black. You go after people who are African. You go after people of color from around the world, and you don't include them as yourself. But it's not quite clear what you are, or, you know, beyond this very narrow appreciation of just like PBC fighters or Al Heyman or whatever. You know what I mean? You know, you're just, you know, it's like we can only get behind an American-born African-American boxer who is undefeated. You know what I mean? He's like real narrow, you know, if he's promoted by the right person, you know.
You know,
and if anyone who doesn't agree with us, then we absolutely hate them and we attack them or whatever. And that's a weird identity to group up around.
It's like
I see all kind of identity issues, and it's like it's got nothing to do with boxing.
Exactly.
To do with sports. It's like they just got issues, right? So I'm like, I can't help them. If it's
That's
even
why,
about boxing, why am I even engaged with them?
That's why I try to avoid the issue. I mean, I knew somebody was going to ask that, but I try to avoid it as much as possible. It's like, you know, when going out with a girl and it turns out she's got daddy issues and all that, and she starts bringing that baggage into the relationship. Like, I don't have time for this fucking shit. So, but I know some people enjoy talking about it, and I understand why, because it's so surreal. That this situation even exists in a fucking sport. So, I mean, it is quite something.
I think he broke it down perfectly. I think Doug broke it down perfectly, though.
I'll be 100% honest with you. I will watch it like you know, when Fred Hawthorne had that meltdown where he's going off about Kelly Swanson yanking his credentials, and he had this like little like a meltdown or like, you know, the revolution begins now or whatever. I watched that with morbid fascination. And it was like I binged on that. It wasn't just like Fred, but it was like the YouTubers that reacted to that. You know, the guys that were like who can't stand Fred. Like I was watching that, like and sometimes chuckling or sometimes listening to them with morbid fascination. And then with this whole thing after I knew when Deontay, and I was a Tyson Fury guy. I liked Tyson Fury to beat Deontay Wilder. I didn't predict Fury to win by knockout or the fight to be as one-sided as it turned out to be. But I knew when Deontay Wilder lost, whether it was against Tyson Fury in the rematch or whenever it would happen down the line. And it was going to happen because the guy's too one-dimensional, and he's a bit of a head case, right? So I knew it was going to happen sooner or later. But I knew once Wilder lost, a lot of these guys would melt down. Like they would flip out and have conspiracy theories and not be able to accept it and would be hyper emotional. And sure enough, they delivered. I mean, I think they kind of surpassed my very low expectations. And I'll be honest with you, I'll listen to some of this stuff with morbid fascination. If they're talking about, you know, whatever, Glovegate, or they're supporting Deontay Wilder's lame excuse about having a heavy costume, or they're, you know, Fred is talking about, you know, he's calling up the Nevada State Athletic Commission and saying, you know, we're going to be present at the next, you know, commission meeting, you know, as if, you know, the Nevada Athletic Commission doesn't have more important things to deal with. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, they're going to sit there and listen to these guys go on about Tyson Fury's gloves or his hand wraps or whatever they're tripping on. It is kind of fascinating in that way, but I don't feel the need to, like, I don't feel the need to say that's bullshit, because if you're in your right mind, you know that's bullshit. And I think there's better people to debunk that shit than me. Like there are boxers, there's former fighters like Paulie Malignaggi and Ishe Smith and Ice John Scully that'll just say, no, that's ridiculous. You can't do that with your gloves. You wouldn't want to do that. It's very, it's impossible to kind of like pull your glove up after it's been wrapped and taped, to pull your glove up to where your fist is in the wrist portion of the glove. You know what I mean? It's better for them to debunk that than me. You know what I'm saying? And it's also, to me, it's better for younger YouTube personalities or younger boxing aficionados with YouTube channels, popular YouTube channels, to go head-to-head with the LDBC than me. I mean, I'm, I hate to say it, but I'm officially like an older guy. I've been doing this for 20 years, and in May I'll be 50 years old. So
you need to get yourself on that.
There's some young guy I just found out about. This IBFP, International Boxing Fans Podcast.
Oh yeah, he's good.
The landlord.
Good. Yeah,
he'll go on these rants.
That dude is a weirdo.
He just did it. We're thinking the same thing, and he'll go on a rant about, keep that same energy, with with these folks.
He threatens to beat people up.
Right?
You know what, dog? You need to get yourself on that TRT, man. You're gonna feel better. Listen, I wanted to, because I think it's already been 20 minutes, so I don't want to keep you on too long. But just two last questions, because somebody in the chat from on Rival Boxing Talk wants to ask you, and then I got a last question for you. Somebody asked, "Can you ask?"
Let me ask a question as well, BDA.
All right, three questions. Then we gotta let him go because he's a busy guy. Go ahead, Stu. You first.
Well, I was just going to ask, right? We're in an era now where you got a lot of snowflake fighters that don't like criticism. It's like Deontay Wilder trying to get. Well, we actually got Paulie Malignaggi evicted from commentating from the fight, sort of thing, stuff like that. Does that hold you back? Does that hold you back actually giving your true opinion sometimes? Because you can get frozen out in boxing today by just saying the wrong thing in an article.
Yeah, I think it affects a lot of the media, and that's a fairly recent thing, that hypersensitivity where the fighter has become such a star that the promotion, the network, everybody falls in line with his whims. And if he wants somebody moved out, if he wants to ban somebody for what he views as unfair criticism, he can actually do that. And there was a time where, like, the biggest stars in boxing
That's
could
right.
not do that. Like Mike Tyson could not get HBO to fire Larry Merchant over critical words. They wouldn't do it, I remember a time when Floyd Mayweather wanted to ban Steve Kim and I from covering his fights, and the promoter was willing to win. Sometimes the promoter was willing to roll over, but the casino that hosted the event, MGM Grand Properties in Mandalay Bay, they were like, no, you're not going to do that. They didn't do anything that merits us yanking their credentials, and they wouldn't allow it to happen. And I think part of the equation is young men are more hypersensitive, right? And they're more passive aggressive, where they want to get back at you that way. And if you dial it back, 20 years or so, if I said something critical about Fernando Vargas, he would get my number and he'd call me up and he'd curse me out, and that'd be the end of it. Or he'd wait till he saw me and be like, "Hey, come here. Fuck you."
Hey, James Toney.
James Toney didn't like him. Just say, he'd wait till he saw you in the gym. And I was one of those writers that would go to the gym, be like, "Man, what the fuck? This little bitch over here thinks Roy Jones Jr. would beat me again, or what?" And he'd call you out, he'd embarrass you, and then he'd feel good, and that would be the end of it, right? But it changed. And I, definitely with the rise of Mayweather, he was a bit, he's a control freak. Even with Oscar De La Hoya, and I'll say this about De La Hoya, he was like the face of boxing for a while. He was a huge star, obviously, a money maker for everybody. But you could criticize him, you could even tease him. But the difference was, in Oscar's day, Press Row, they were affiliated with major newspapers. And it was harder to move these guys off their stance. It was harder to intimidate guys like Wallace Matthews or Michael Katz, you know, who were all, you know, writing for these big daily newspaper institutions, you know, like New York Newsday or New York, you know, the New York Daily News. You know what I'm saying? And those papers, those editors would back up the writers, or the Boxing Association, Boxing Writers Association of America would get behind a writer if a fighter or a promoter. Often it was a promoter, like Don King would try to pull rank like that and say, you wrote something bad about me and I didn't like, so I'm not going to let you cover my card. And the newspaper or the newspapers or the fellow boxing writers would say, well, okay, well then none of us are going to cover this event. And so they stood together like that because they were they were professionals. They were backed by professional institutions, and they belonged to professional associations that acted as such. But as it became, you know, as the internet kind of took over, and you have more kind of like amateurs becoming writers and not really professional writers, you had more fanboys, you know, who wanted to jock ride certain fighters, whether it's De La Hoya or Felix Trinidad or Roy Jones Jr. or Floyd Mayweather or whatever. And then I also got to the point where the boxers got so big that, you know, they had deals with the networks, and even part of the deals with the networks, you know, allowed the fighters to have more say so in what happened with what would happen with the promotions and who could say what or who could do what. Not just for the media that covered these events, but for the on-air broadcasters. You know, I've been told that certain things that, you know, when Mayweather moved from HBO to Showtime in 2013, that part of the you know, the contracts of and I don't know if this is true, this is what I've heard from reliable sources, that the broadcasters, they couldn't like bring up the domestic abuse charges and his jail time and stuff like that during his fight, you know. So it's a new paradigm, and I don't like it at all. I honestly don't think it's good for the fighters. I don't think it's good for the fighters when they don't allow themselves to be challenged by the media or by anybody else, because I think it makes them fragile. If they just create this little false reality where they're the king and everything they do is great and they don't have any flaws, well, they don't get better. They don't challenge their own character. And I think we saw that a little bit with Deontay Wilder. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have some good people around him. I mean, Mark Greenland is obviously somebody he could learn from. He could learn, you know, better boxing technique, you know, better boxing fundamentals. One of his friends who's part of the camp is Malik Scott, who was a heavyweight prospect at one time, a French contender. And Malik Scott has that foundation that Wilder does not have. He has that jab. He has the footwork. He has the balance. You know, and this is somebody who's part of Wilder's camp, so I'm sure could be imparting some knowledge to Wilder. Now, maybe Wilder just isn't bright enough to pick these things up, but maybe he's just too stubborn, and he's used to being the boss of everything, and nobody can tell him anything. And that's a detriment. That's not a good thing. So I think it's bad. I think it's bad for everybody when the boxers or the stars are able to dictate who covers them and how their fights are called or what the commentators are allowed to say. I don't think it's any good, and I like it better the way it used to be.
That's right, man. These fighters nowadays, they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, roll up their sleeves, get a little elbow grease, and get the job done. That's three cliches that I just sprang up right now. I'm doing good today. Listen, I'm going to skip my two. I'm going to skip my two question, my question here rather, and get to two questions from the audience, and I'll throw you mine later on if you can come on another day, real quick, because I know you got to go.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Unrivaled wants to ask you, where the hell did this cultism for Nicolino Loque come from? So many people call him the best defensive fighter ever.
It's so stupid. I know. And you know those people haven't even watched one entire fight with this guy. Because if they did, they would have listened. You know, Lochi was, you know, his nickname was the Untouchable, right? So he was a defensive guy, and he had moves in there. You know, if you look at highlights of him, it looks great. He's kind of shoulder rolling, and he would go to the ropes and all that. He was a tough dude. Tough guy. He could take a lot of punishment. Had a lot of fights, won a lot of fights, got a lot of hometown, home country, home continent decisions against visiting fighters. who were flat out better than him. He was often outworked, and he often took a lot of punishment. And I met Lochi before he died. He was inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame. I believe it was maybe in 2000 or in 2001. And he had visited other World Boxing. The World Boxing Hall of Fame was kind of like a rival to the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota, New York, and it was based in Los Angeles. And it was pretty big for a while. It was big in the 90s and, right up until about 2000, 2001, and then it kind of imploded. But they used to, I used to meet like, legendary fighters, like Carmen Basilio or Ismael Laguna or, foreign fighters, that had never been on U.S. soil, like KSI Galaxy and stuff like that. But anyways, I digress. I met Lochi. He was punchy as hell.
Oh, shit.
You know what I mean? He was one of them dudes walking around on his heels, and if you looked at his face, he had cauliflower ears, and you know what I mean? He was a pug. He had a flat nose. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he had over 100 fights. You know what I'm saying? So, even if you're a defensive fighter, you have that many fights. You're gonna have the wear and tear of all those rounds and all those battles. But he wasn't Pernell Whitaker. I'm just putting it that way. But I just think that's a hipster thing. So everybody, I kind of went back and forth with somebody on Twitter recently who said that Lochi would destroy Cop Zoo.
Oh, come on.
Like, bullshit. I know you haven't watched this, dude.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, we've had people,
I like that shit.
You know what it is? It's people that make those videos on YouTube and they put all trap music and all of a sudden the guy looks a lot better than he was. All right, listen, Guns, last question.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you,
Doug,
I
wanted your take on, I just wanted to ask you a question. Subriel Matias, the Puerto Rican that was 15 fights with 15 KOs undefeated, that unfortunately killed Maxim Dadachev. Do you think he exhibited some signs of PTSD in his loss to Petros Anayan? Because that was a war. Could he not pull the trigger the same, or he was just in a tough fight? What's your answer to that?
No, I do think so, and it's only human. And some fighters, after being involved in a bout where their opponent passes away, where there's a ring fatality, it takes a tremendous toll on them psychologically and spiritually and emotionally. And some guys are not, they're never the same. They just cannot put it together. I saw that with Gabriel Reyes. I saw that with a great guy out of the San Diego area named Paul Vaden. He was involved in a fight where I believe a man named, a good fighter named Stefan Johnson passed away after he beat him, after he stopped him. And he had maybe one or two more fights after that, and he had to hang him up. And even in those fights, even in the fights that he won, and you could certainly see it in the fights that he lost, he was not able to let his hands go. And you have to be a very special fighter, a great fighter, to overcome that, like Ray Robinson and Ezra Charles. But even they will tell you, and even old timers will tell you, and old historians and boxing writers have written that they were never as good as they were prior to that ring death. With Robinson, it was a guy named Jimmy Doyle. I forget the name of the fighter that died at the hands of Ezra Charles. But Ezra Charles was at his best as a light heavyweight. And it wasn't long after that fight, he went to heavyweight. And he was still a really good fighter, good all-around fighter who made for entertaining fights. But he didn't go after the knockout as hard as he used to prior to that ring fatality. And I think, I'm not saying that we've seen a mirage with Artur Beterbiev because he's a tremendous fighter, but I do take that into account that the nail, Alexander Vozdik, that he was involved in a fight where a fighter almost died, where Adonis Stevenson suffered permanent damage and his career ended. And that fight after Stevenson and before the Beterbiev title unification bout, he didn't look good at all. To me, Vozdik looked like he was fighting against himself. He wasn't putting it together. He wasn't really letting his hands go with any sort of purpose or fluidity. And I wonder if he was mentally, or not mentally impaired, but psychologically held back with that tough fight with Artur Beterbiev. I think when the going gets tough, it's hard to dig deep and go out there and have the quote unquote killer instinct when you've actually killed a man. Think about that. So Absolutely. I think ring fatalities always affect the fighter.
That's right. Yeah, and I think Kovalev's the only exception I've ever seen. That guy seemed to be unfazed by it. He was it's like Stu here. He said one time, he said, like, it's almost as if Kovalev said, all right, who else am I going to kill next? Line them up. That guy's, he's got the stone cold mentality killer. And I don't think it seemed to affect him that much. But for the most part, yeah, history tells us that some of these guys, they're never the same after they, kill somebody in the ring. Listen, dog, that was our last. I don't want to keep you on too much, man. I know you're busy, but I didn't even get my questions across. Hopefully, you come back next time, man, and we have a little bit more time, a little bit more relaxed. Yeah, because I mean, I got a whole bunch of questions for you.
Good. Yeah, no, let's reschedule it as soon as possible.
All right, fantastic, man, and thank you for being here. I'll bombard you with questions the next time. I had to sacrifice mine right now.
I look forward to it.
All right, fantastic, Doug. Don't forget, guys, check out Ring Magazine for more of Doug's insight in boxing. He's the one that's managing all the writers over there. And check out his Twitter, too. It's at, hold on a second. Let me put it up on the screen here so I don't forget. It's, yeah, right, Douglas Fischer, at Doggy Fischer on Twitter. So you can check him out there and check him out at Ring TV as well. And Doug, thank you for being on, man. Really an honor to speak to you. Really fun. Thank you for answering the audience's questions. And we'll catch you on the next one, man.